Okay, the recording started, and I should warn anybody that's watching the recording that Harry's cats may appear. I think we should make that a condition of him attending. And in fact, I'll see if any of mine will come in and jump up. Oh, that's an evil cat. Is that Lucy? Short for Lucifer?
Pep, short for pepper.
Weirdly, we've got a Pip and a Pebbles.
Oh, great. Put them all together. Pebbles.
Say that 3 times fast.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Right. So, just to recap about what we're doing holistically. Remember, you guys are consultants. You've been brought in for this case study, this hotel. So you've got together in your consultant businesses and you've been having chats amongst yourselves, and you've already started taking minutes for that to think about how you'll approach it. Remember that the end game is to create a report for this company detailing how things work just now. That's not negotiable. So all the stuff that we're talking about in the labs and all the lectures that are upcoming about UML and all these other types of diagrams, they are non-negotiable and they must be in your final report. So you have to describe how it works just now. You may also want to describe how it might work if you change things. And that would be a nice thing to put in. In the meantime, you're going to have to find out how things work in that business. And that, of course, is part of what today's tutorial is about, when you can talk to the staff. But what I want to talk about today and probably next week is some of the techniques that you can use to actually talk to people, how you can, different types of event that you might have, just any way that that might work. Because there's lots of different ways of doing it. I mean, it's turning up in someone's doorstep and saying, tell me about it, is one, but there's lots of different ones. So as I say, that's what we're going to be talking about. As ever, don't be shy about jumping in. I'm looking at this and I think I've allocated 2 weeks for this. So we'll see how far we get today with some of the techniques. And we'll not go on too late to make sure that you get a break before you come back in for the tutorial. So everyone happy about how that's going to work? Okay, as ever, the stuff's already been on Moodle and it's also on the OneNote now, so I've updated OneNote. I'm managing to keep just a wee bit ahead. David's also brought his cat to the lecture, but he's not turned on his camera, which I think that counts as non-engagement with the module. So I think David has to turn on his camera to show us his cat. And any cat that's called Thunderwing Doomslayer, no wonder it's moved out. I don't think it is landlord issues. I think it just went, really? And they've gone away to find a more caring owner, Sean. Okay, so that's our plan today. So let me start off just talking about different types of technique and why we might have them. Now, you'll remember right at the start that I pointed out some of the books that this was based on. Can someone give me a thumbs up if they can still hear me? My camera has frozen. Yep, okay, thank you. There's also virtual thumbs up on Teams, by the way. Thanks, Jamie. Okay. It was maybe just starting up PowerPoint. I don't know what my computer's doing this morning. Like I said, it updated last night and it was doing all sorts of weird things. However, we shall struggle on. So, at the start, I was talking about the Business Systems Analysis book from the British Computing Society. And there's also another book called 99 Techniques. The techniques that we're going to look at all exist in there, not surprisingly. But I've taken a few, and I've taken a few of the more, few of what I consider the most used ones. Feel free to look for more, but again, in terms of what you need to do for this module and for this assessment, I would expect you to at least carry out the techniques that we're going to cover. So the ones that I'm showing you, I would expect to see something of those in your report, okay? And as I say, I'm not doing everything. There are hundreds of these things. The book, you remember, had 99 techniques that you can use. The reason there are so many is because they each have their own attributes that might make them reasonable to use in a particular situation. I also think that part of it is about how comfortable each business systems analyst is in using each of the techniques, and I'll talk a wee bit about that later when we look at some of them. So we're not trying to employ every technique every time. Of course not, that would just be silly. So it's good to have an idea of what the different techniques are and how they might be used so that you can bring these things into use as and when you need them. So just like any other toolbox, there's lots of tools in there, but you don't use the same tool every time. You don't always use a hammer. I know some of you will, but that's not a good approach to things. So try and understand the techniques, try and understand what they're trying to do and why they might be the best thing for what you're doing at that point. That's the book that we were talking about before. There's a link. It is quite expensive, so I have checked and it is in the library. This one, I can't see an electronic version, but the other book does have an online electronic version, so you can read it online from the library if you haven't looked at it yet. As I say, I'll cover what some of the techniques are and what they're used for, and try and give you an idea of when you'll use some of these. And I would expect to see them in your reports. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see all of them in your presentation though, because you have limited time in your presentation. You're trying to win this contract. So you want enough in your presentation to show that you've understood the business, but not so much that you're trying to show, not so much that you show how you're trying to understand the techniques. So remember, focus on the business, focus on the customer. So I'll expect to see them all in the final report, but not necessarily in the presentation, because I think that would, I mean, I'm going to cover 7 or 8 different techniques, and you've only got a 5-minute presentation. It would be difficult to fit them all in. So perform all the analyses, but maybe not present them all. Any questions about that? Nope, all happy? Okay. As I say, I'm going to cover some of these. Do not interpret the order as being as any sort of preference, because if it is, the first one that we've actually looked at is CATWO that we looked at last time when we were looking at stakeholder analysis. That's also an investigative technique, not surprisingly. Okay, so that we did it under stakeholder analysis because you tend to do it as part of the stakeholder analysis, but it's another one of these investigative techniques, and it could just as easily belong in this section. Okay, so I'm going to cover some. They are not in order, they are just useful, well-used ones that you might find helpful, but don't read any more into it than that. Okay. So the first one that we're going to look at is something called a PEST or a Pestle Analysis. Yet another acronym for you to learn. So what we have is a political, economic, social, cultural, technological, legal, and environmental technique. In other words, we're going to look at the business that we're analysing and try to understand it from each of these viewpoints. So not unlike the way we did with capital. And in fact, there's some crossover, and you'll see that in a lot of these techniques. I'm going to cover Pestle, which is a slightly more involved one. Originally, it was a PEST, political, economic, social, cultural, and technological analysis. But as with many of these things, stuff gets added. So I'm looking at ones that's added the legal ones, because that's always an issue, and environmental, because yes, that's becoming more and more of an issue these days. But there are other versions out there that may add other things. Are there any international aspects to the business that you need to consider? What about demographics? Anybody who's been watching the news will have seen the sad news that the Meta stock price has tanked, and Mark Zuckerberg has lost over $24 billion overnight. I shed a tear, I have to say. But that was done because fewer people are going to Facebook. And why are fewer people going to Facebook? Because younger demographics are tending to head towards TikTok or Instagram or, well, I don't know, I'm not young, you guys tell me. So demographic issues can be an issue for a business, as can ethical issues. Now, as this is being recorded and going onto YouTube, I am certainly not going to talk about any ethical issues that Facebook might have, because even with this tanked stock price, they can still afford more lawyers than I can. But you would want to examine the ethical approach of a business. And there are still some people, I saw an article in the Times the other day from a fairly ill-informed commentator saying that when businesses look at an ethical aspect to their business, it's the start of their decline. I actually take the opposite view. Businesses who don't take account of an ethical approach will actually see a problem with their share price and with their business's public perception. Now, that's fine if you're a back-end producer. If you're a chemical plant somewhere producing chemicals for other businesses, the fact that you have a poor ethical policy, even if it comes out into the real world, if you hear that Chemint International, and I apologise if there is actually a Chemint International, I made that up. If you hear that Chemint International has a poor ethical policy, you're going to go, that's terrible. But it's Chemint International, you've never heard of them, so you don't care. It wouldn't occur to you to think, oh well, Chemint International are a big source of plastics and actually produce much of the plastic in my new iPhone, therefore I won't buy an iPhone. So distance is an issue, but there's a reason, if you've noticed some of the TV ads, why people like Shell and Esso are saying how they're turning green. BP are turning green whilst selling petrol. Of course they're not turning green, but they like to have some green stuff in there to try and have a better reputation, because reputation matters. You may have to put petrol in your car, but if you're passing a BP and a Shell and an Esso filling station all within close proximity, often you'll choose just how you feel about the company. To be honest, you'll more often choose by which one's on your side of the road, but we'll let that pass. So I won't talk about the IDE ones. We'll stick to the Pestle ones. But remember, there are other approaches and other ways to go. So when you see all these, it's the same kind of thing. It's taking account of particular items and how that might affect you. Now, the key point about a Pestle analysis is that it's external factors. It's not to do with you, it's what's happening outside. Because your business probably isn't involved politically, but it does make a difference to you what happens politically. Your business may or may not be big enough to have an effect on the economics of the country, but the economics of the country will have an effect on your business. So Pestle is about analysing what's happening externally, looking at those things that we've identified from the acronym, and trying to understand how they affect your business just now and how it may affect it in the future. So it's a kind of first step. There's no point in you saying, oh yes, well, I'm going to do this, this and this in my business. If you've ignored the fact that you've just had a... Did anyone hear that? That was the cats falling down the stairs. At least I hope it's the cats. My daughter's in the house. I'm assuming it's the cats. It wasn't strong enough for the cats. Oh no, don't worry. It's not a fall down. It's a fighting whilst falling down the stairs. I do it all the time. They're enjoying it. Yes, there's no point in you setting internal changes. So there's no point in you saying to this hotel, I want to do this. If you've ignored the fact that the council are going to build a bypass and have put a compulsory purchase order on your hotel and are going to knock it down. So you have to consider the external stuff before you think about the internal stuff and what that's going to, how that's going to affect you. So we'll go through some of these things and think about the areas that you might want to consider. And whilst we're doing it, you specifically might want to consider how that would affect your case study. So you might think, well, it's a hotel. How does a change of government affect me? Well, the United Kingdom went from a Lib Dem Tory coalition to a Tory government, and to appease the far-right members of his own party, David Cameron promised a referendum. The referendum was lost. We exited Europe. And now all of a sudden, places like hotels can't get enough workers. Fruit goes unpicked in the fields. You know, choose your own example. So things like that can have a direct knock-on, even if it takes a few years to come in to being. There is an increase of over 10% in national insurance happening just now. National insurance is paid partly by the individual and partly by the business. Change in national insurance caused by the government has a knock-on effect on your business. So taxes cause a change. Any legislation will cause a change. Any priorities that they may have will cause a change. You might be in the chemical plant business, but if you've got a government that wants to prove its ethical underpinnings, they may not want to allow that change. And you also have to be careful in terms of the scope. So we're in Scotland, so we have local government, councils, we have Scottish government, we have Westminster government. We still, to some extent, have European, less so now, clearly, but we still, to some extent, because we still have to take account of the fact that we may be trading abroad. We may be trading and people may be coming from Europe, and similarly, the rest of the world. So we have to understand that scope if it affects our business. If you're in the business of building nuclear power stations, you can do that in England, but you can't do it in Scotland. Because the Scottish government have said no planning permission will ever be given for a new nuclear power station. But in England, they're more than happy to do it. So there is a difference depending on where you are, depending on what you do, and that has to be taken into account. So have a think how that might affect your hotel. Perhaps slightly esoteric is the economic approach. Do you have any money? Do other people have any money? Does the increase in national insurance and the increase in heating bills and the increase in food bills mean that they have less spare money to come for a weekend away at your hotel? Or even to come to your restaurant for a Friday night dinner? Or even to pop into your coffee shop and have tea and a bun? All of these economic things, whether they are extremely local, and you'll always see on the news if something happens, you know, a factory closes down and it's appalling and people lose jobs, but they'll always talk about the knock-on effects, because it's not just the people at the factory that have lost their jobs. That's, say, 500 people who got a wage and would go into the local butchers and the local newsagents and the local shoe shop and the local fill in whatever. Less money being spent, which means these shops get in less money, which means they require fewer staff, which means there's a knock-on effect from that, which might even involve the shops closing. So the economic effects can be very local, or they can be a response to worldwide issues. There's been recession after recession after recession. Most of you will remember the recession after the banking crisis about 14 years ago, but I'm old enough to remember earlier recessions. So even though it was a banking crisis in 2008, it affected everyone else. Okay, that's political and economic. Any questions or comments so far? I think my only comment is, what the heck are those shots? Okay, next one in our Pestle is social cultural, which brings us back, I suppose, to Facebook. Who are your customers? Remember, Facebook is an American college thing. So it was originally designed to appeal to people of college age, university age. And that's not where they are now. It's more likely that the person in college's grandmother will use Facebook than it is. I mean, that's what the stats tell me. So let's have a quick show of hands. Who still goes on Facebook regularly? Just put up your hand or give a thumbs up, because that doesn't persist. Give a virtual thumbs up if you still use Facebook regularly. So that's about 25% of you. That's an issue. If you guys aren't using it now, when are you going to start using it? And that's why Facebook's or Meta's stock prices tanked so much. If you go down now, what's the knock-on effect for that next year? Who are you bringing into the business? So who are your customers? Where are they coming from? Are they going to stay? 10 years ago, you couldn't walk down the high street without seeing a mobile phone shop every third or fourth shop. How many of them are there anymore? 20 years ago, you couldn't walk down a high street without seeing 10 or 12 shoe shops. Where are they all? One for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans there. So Who are your customers? Are they the same? Are they going to change in the future? And what changes will that have on your business? Yeah, that's interesting. I can't stand Facebook. I never go on. And Eugenius has just pointed out that it goes on 90% for the marketplace, which is the same for me. When I go in to look at guitars, I go into Facebook Marketplace, look at guitars and come off again. Sean, you've still got your hand up. I'm assuming that was a hangover from the Who Uses Facebook. You just click it again and it goes away. That's it. Okay, so social cultural can be an issue for a business, as can technological. And this is the very class that we're talking about, technological. A computer in the 1930s, because computer is not a new term, a computer in the 1930s was somebody sitting at a desk with paper, pencil, and if they were very lucky, a mechanical calculator. You would have whole offices full of computers. And then the electronic computer came along. And computers were no longer needed. So now we don't call them electronic computers anymore. We've gone back to computers because people computers aren't a thing. We don't need to differentiate. So what else is going to change in your business? What else is going to change from your hotel? You might have been advertising in the Sunday Post for the last 30 years to get people to come. Is the Sunday Post where people are looking to find cheap hotel deals? What happens if technology invades your business and changes it? What happens if technology changes society, which causes a knock-on effect to your business? What are those changes? What effects might they have, and what are you going to do about it? Otherwise, you end up not existing anymore. The example I've given there is Blockbuster and Netflix. Blockbuster, for those of you too young to remember, was a shop, and you went into the shop. Originally, they would let you hire videotapes, and then later on they changed to DVDs, and actually in the end also games. You could hire games, and then towards the very end they mainly sold popcorn and Coke, as far as I could tell. And I'm saying they lost out to Netflix, but does anyone remember, or does anyone know what the Netflix business model was when it started?
Mail order DVD rental?
That's right. So it was like Blockbuster, but you didn't have to live next to a Blockbuster. You went online, you chose a DVD from a list, and when it was available, they sent it to you in the post. And then when you're done with it, you mailed it back to them. That was actually a moderately successful business. It wasn't the behemoth we see now, but it was a moderately successful business. The difference is that Netflix changed. Netflix saw the change to broadband that could support video and went that way. Blockbuster was stuck. And I'm like Matthew and Sean. I do remember going into Blockbuster and buying, rather than hiring a DVD that I had to remember to take back the next day, I'd buy 10 of the ones that they had at 99 pence. And then I'd watch them when I had time and then take them to a charity shop. I'm not entirely sure that was a good business model for Blockbuster though. And yes, there were similar things Love Film was one of them, and as James points out, Amazon bought them, and then the market changed and Love Film disappeared. Although it kind of lives on with Amazon Prime and Amazon TV, or whatever they're calling it these days. So, particularly in the industry we're in, technology is a clear threat. I think Sean's just admitted to copyright theft in the chat, so I'm not going to read that out. Although I will say I don't know how many people actually want to watch a film again and again and again. Maybe there are people that would do it. I don't know. Okay, so that's pest. Now we've got to L, which is legal. What happens in terms of the legislative environment? What's changing? Do you have any new regulations that you need to cope with? Are there specific things coming in? Are there health and safety issues? Are there environmental issues? Are there changes to national insurance that mean that your staff have to have different things? Are there changes to pensions? Because now every business has to enrol their staff in a pension. So you need to understand the legislative landscape and do something about it. And often, as I mentioned in the other module that you took with me, that legislative landscape might not just be where you are. And in fact, more likely you'll have lots of different legislative frameworks depending where you are, what country you're in, where you're selling to, and where people are coming from. So we're back to the living in Paisley, in Scotland, in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in the world stuff. So there might be different legislative frameworks that you need to consider. Finally, there's the environmental issues becoming far more to the fore these days. And that's not a criticism. It's simply me making the point that it is something that's happening, and it is something that businesses are now having to look at an awful lot more than they ever did. And it could be something as big as building a chemical plant, or something as small as your hotel asking whether or not you recycle your glass bottles. And there are eco hotels who make a point of saying, we are green, we do everything we can. Part of me is moderately skeptical. Yes, it is environmentally helpful not to wash your towels every day, but let's not kid ourselves that it doesn't also have a knock-on effect on the business's bottom line. If you're suddenly washing half the amount of towels that you did before, that's saving you a fortune. Okay, everyone happy with that before we move on? Okay. So how do you use a Pestle analysis, and where would it come in? Now, there are different places where you can try and understand the business, try and understand what people are saying, and we'll talk about some of those later, interviews, workshops, that kind of thing. This one is really helpful in a workshop, so a large forum where you've got lots of people. And it means that you get people who understand the business from different aspects. And they'll all be able to contribute under all of these headings. If you have a smaller group, they may not have a complete understanding of everything that goes on in the business. So you want a larger forum, get a workshop, get lots of people, and get everybody to chip in. it's probably best doing it systematically. So you go through each one in time. So I want you to think about this. It's probably best also to flag to them before they come to the workshop what the headings are, so that they can have a wee think about it before they come in. But you go through each one systematically, get everyone's input, and as you would do with any of these things, you document it. What are people saying and why? So you'll have lots and lots of input under lots of different headings, which is just a bundle of data. So what do you do with it? Well, you have to start putting it into some sort of order. So you might want to start saying, okay, so you've given me 5 things technologically that might happen. So which do you think is the most likely and will have the most effect on our business? So that's the number one thing we need to think at. What's next? So what's 1, what's 2, what's 3? So we can start to identify any issues that might be coming down the line from external influences. So we identify them, put them in order, but in this specific analysis, you're not saying what do we do about it. We'll look at another analysis, specifically a SWOT analysis, where we will do that. But for now, all we're doing is trying to identify the issues. Specifically ones that are outside the business. So it's something that we can affect mostly. And you should only think about items that actually affect your business. So there might be a whole bunch of political things that you don't like, but won't actually affect the business as it is. Outside, however, can be, it isn't binary. So if you're in a large organization with lots of different departments, changes made by, say, the IT department, say, for example, your organization puts in a new system without any consultation with those that are going to be using the system. In effect, that was an external factor that's affecting your business, because you're going to have to plot how you react to that change, whether you will be able to provide the same sort of functionality that you did before, and if not, how you're going to get around it. So sometimes, even though you're in the same organization, it may still be outside. So HR, IT, facilities management, whatever it happens to be, depending on where you are and depending on where you're doing this analysis, outside might not always mean not of this organization. It might just mean outside the bit that you're considering. Any questions about that? Okay, while you're thinking about whether we're going to have questions, James is going to sing the soundtrack to Yellow Submarine, just to put us in the mood.
I don't think so.
Okay, so that's been an hour, so I think it's break time. Okay, so we'll take 10 minutes and I'll see you back in 10. Okay, mystery solved. We're changing some curtains. There's a pile of curtain hooks at the top of the stairs. You apparently are the cat's mortal enemy. You'll be pleased to know that the cat engaged in combat and won. So there's now not a pile of curtain hooks at the top of the stairs, but there are curtain hooks all the way down the stairs and scattered through the hall. So well done, Pebbles. Congratulations. Thank you for keeping us safe. Wave to the nice boys and girls. Say bye-bye. You can tell she's happy about being here too. And she's still in one piece as well. So. Oh, man. It's getting nicer again, as you can tell from the chinks of light coming through the blinds. That's the mother. We've got two. We've got a mother and a daughter. So. Okay. Anybody thought of anything since we've been away? Nope. All happy?
Just thinking
right.
that there was. Oops, sorry.
Sorry.
I was just thinking there was a little bit of overlap in the Pestle system, depending on like the perspective you look at it from. Like, well, you mentioned political mandates about nuclear power. That is also, that might have been born from an ecological perspective.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
These aren't strict definitions, and there will be crossover, and some will come under 2, 3, maybe even 4 different headings. But they are helpful headings in order to perform the analysis. But yeah, there will be, they'll come under different headings, they will be part of different bits, so they are certainly not, they don't just sit on their own. You're quite right. Any other questions or comments just now? Well, not if you listen to some of the not if you listen to some of the skeptics, Logan, because they don't believe that it happens. Every time I try and click on this thing, it disappears. I'm assuming Teams has updated. This is just... Ugh! There we go. I had to be quick to get that going. Man, it's getting really bright now. I think I'm going to need my sunglasses. Okay, so as I said, we'll see how many of these get through. We'll do our next one, which is something called a most analysis. Famous, what do you need for the presentation? What explanation, or in what in particular? If you're not coming on audio, what to do is put it into the chat, and I'll monitor the chat, and we'll get back to you at that point. Oh, he's leaving. Okay, so a most analysis. A most analysis is a way of thinking, where were we, where are we, and where are we going next? So what's the reason for the business? Why were we here? What were we doing? What was it we wanted to do? And where do we want to get to in the future? So most is the mission. What's the mission of the organization? So it may or may not be a business. You can apply these things, of course, not just on businesses, but for any organization. What was the mission of the organization? You know, the dreaded mission statement. What are its objectives? What's it trying to do? And in order to attain those objectives, what's the strategy? So where do we want to do in the medium to long term? And tactics, which are the shorter term. Okay? So we have this idea that we're trying to figure out what it is we actually want to do. What is the purpose of us being here? What are the aims, and what actions do we need to take, short, medium, and long term, in order to make that happen? And you might think that that's a fairly fundamental thing. Shouldn't it, in that word that I hate, be obvious? And yes, it is fundamental, but all too often it's not obvious. Because all too often, people aren't really sure of where the organisation's going or what they want to get to. Or there may be disagreements. Some people may want to take the organisation one way and another want to go a completely different way. Sometimes those are complementary aims. So for your hotel, the restaurant might want to bring in more business. The hotel might want to sell more bedrooms. That's fine. They can work together. And in fact, they might actually feed into each other. If you have more people staying in the hotel, they may eat in the restaurant. But where they diverge, that can be an issue. Where people disagree, that can be a problem. So you need to make sure that the organisation itself understands what it wants to do, which actually isn't as clear-cut as you might hope it would be. Make sure that everyone in the organisation agrees about it and understands how they're going to get there. And you remember when we looked at, oh no, we didn't. So there has to be some sort of plan. Everybody has to come in every day knowing what it is they're trying to do. I am trying to get more people into the restaurant. I am trying to sell more bedrooms. So it's important to get that clarity. So to do this, we need some definitions. Does the organisation know what it wants to do? And if not, let's get that settled to begin with. How can you analyse an organisation that doesn't know what it wants to do or where it wants to go? We then need some clarity around it. Is it clear for everyone in all areas of the business? And do they understand how they fit in to those objectives? So communication is key, as it is for so many things. Everyone has to understand what the organisation is trying to do and how they can help the organisation do that. And if everyone's agreed, and if everyone's going towards the same goal, and everyone knows about it, then hopefully they will commit to getting towards that goal. So it's a bit airy-fairy kind of stuff. It's a bit of stuff that people should be doing but often aren't. So it's about getting clarity. Everyone happy with that? Famous, we'll talk about your thing when you're done. I think you're misunderstanding a wee bit what you have to do just now. So we'll talk about it once the information bit's done, okay? All right, everyone happy with that? Okay. So we've tried to understand what's happening outside of the organisation. We have tried to get a clear idea of what the organisation wants to do and where it wants to get to and how it's going to do that. Perhaps the next thing we might want to do is try to understand the resources that are available within the organisation to make those goals. So we might want to do an audit. It's sometimes called a resource audit, sometimes called a resource analysis. It's the same thing. But we're trying to understand the resources that exist in the organisation, partly so that we can use those resources and partly so that we can identify where we might have to bring in other resource. And if we are going to make changes, do we need different resource? Is some of the resource that we have no longer appropriate? Should it be going? So what do we have? How does that affect our plans now and in the future? And is there a gap there? And when I say a resource, often people think about a thing, something you can hold in your hand, but it's not always like that. I mean, they can be. So you can have tangible resources. How much money do you have in the bank? That's a resource. Of course it's a resource. Do you own the building that you're in? That's a physical resource. Do you own those vans that you're using to deliver? That's a resource. So there can be tangible resources, but there's also intangible resources. What if you have created some technology to allow your organisation to work? What if that delivery company that we're talking about had a fantastic piece of software that allowed them to come up with the best possible delivery route, which means that all their deliveries happened much more quickly than their competitors? All of a sudden that's a resource, and it's an intangible resource because you can't touch it, but it's certainly a resource because it's something that you can use either, say, to expand your operations, or it could be something that you could sell to your competitors. There are other types of intangible resource. Do people trust you? Do people trust you enough to actually come to your business and pay money? Do you have a reputation? Or do people look at you and go, maybe not? Our case study is a hotel. You might want to look at a group called the Britannia Hotel Group, who have just been voted UK's worst hotel group for, quite impressively, the 9th year running. And yet they're still going. They have no reputation. Nobody likes them. And yet they're still going. And I can give you some insight into that. I had to fly out of an airport one time I was only going to be there one night, and they charged me very little money to stay overnight and to leave my car at their hotel while I was away. So even if your reputation's bad, you can still make up for it in other ways. Another thing is the culture of the organization. What will people do? Are the people in the organization empowered to make decisions, to make things better for people? I've got, you know, the Apple TV box, the wee gadget, connect your TV and plays Apple TV and lets you mirror your iPad, that kind of thing. So I had an Apple TV and I'd had it for, I don't know, 3 years or something, at least. And it stopped working and I couldn't get it to work. And there didn't seem to be anything physical wrong with it. And I'd gone through all the online famous, are you on a trampoline? What are you doing? I'd gone through all the online stuff. I'd gone through the troubleshooting. I'd talked to them online and I just couldn't get this thing working. And they suggested that I make an appointment at the Apple store, which I did. So I went into the Apple store, took my thing with me, and the guy behind the desk basically did all the same stuff that I'd done. I mean, not surprisingly, I mean, he's got no idea who's walking in. I've probably got a wee bit more understanding about technology than the average customer, but he went through all the stuff. He couldn't understand it either. So not only was it not working, it was not working in a unique way, if you like. They couldn't understand why it wasn't working. You couldn't even figure out why it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, because everything seemed to be there but not working. So I wasn't surprised. I'd only gone in the off chance. So I thanked him very much and he said, hang on a minute. And he walked over to the shelves, reached up, grabbed a box with a brand new Apple TV in it, brought it back, opened it up, took out the Apple TV that was in there, gave it to me and said, yeah, that one should work. And I'll just do an exchange. And this was at least, this is a box that's at least 3 years old. It's out of warranty a long, long time ago. But they cared about their reputation. So they didn't quite know why it wasn't working, couldn't give me an answer to why it wasn't working. So that's a reputational issue. The culture in the shop was, that guy didn't need to go and talk to a manager or get some sign off somewhere. He just walked over to the shelf and did what he thought was best for the customer. Not surprisingly, that colours my view of Apple as an organisation and makes me more likely to go back. So intangible resources can actually be one of the most compelling reasons. So much so, in fact, that if you look at an organisation's finances, quite often you'll see on there a monetary value attached to the company's reputation. Goodwill, it's called. And they'll actually say this company is worth more because people like it. They've actually put a money value on the reputation of the company, which is quite odd when you think about it. Okay, so there's other resources available. Human resources, of course, are a big one, quite often forgotten. Who do we have? What do they do? What do they know? Are they motivated? What are our staff like? Are they a good resource, or are they actually not up to what we need either now or in the future, and will we have to look at getting people with different skills, different experiences? So a resource audit is absolutely important, both to understand what kind of resources you have for the moment, but also what you might want for the future. Any questions about that one? Somebody's put in the chat that any publicity is good publicity, to which I have two words, Wraith and Rovers. Okay, nobody's got any questions or comments about that. Seriously, do you not watch the news? Go to the BBC News site and put in Wraith Rovers. Okay, what time have we got? Okay, I think we'll do one last one. This is something called a Boston box. And the idea is to look at your business and try and figure out the relative value of each of the strands of that business. What does each bit bring to the whole? So, first of all, you have to understand what all the different bits are. So if you're Microsoft, one bit might be Windows, another bit might be the Office software, another bit might be Xbox, another bit might be cloud services. So you figure out what all the different bits are, and then you try and understand out of that whole portfolio what each of these things is. So it's a very simple box that puts each of those items into a specific box. Top left there, you've got the star, and that's, you know, your good products. It's whatever you're doing, it's high growth, so you're selling more or getting in more custom. It's got a high market share, so it, you know, people will come to you more than anyone else. That has an end limit, clearly. And as you move on, it becomes something called a cash cow. So the stuff is there and it just keeps on bringing in money. So as we're talking about Microsoft, Microsoft Office is an example of that. So we have Microsoft Office. It's high growth. People were buying Office again and again. As people bought a computer, they bought Word and Excel and all the rest to go with it. It had a high market share, so there were other Office style products, but how many of you ever used Corel Office or WordPerfect Office? But there's only a limit that you can get to for that. So once everybody's got a copy of Office, how often do you need it? And in fact, that's been an issue for Microsoft. Once you've got to, say, Word version 2007, how many new functions do you actually need? Because the 80-20 rule kicks in. 80% of the time you use 20% of the functions in that piece of software, which is, of course, exactly why Microsoft now don't want you to buy Office. They want you to rent it. So you go back to them and give them a certain amount of money every year. That then becomes a cash cow. It's not got any growth. Anybody who's wanted to get it pretty much already has it. But it's the highest market share. People all know it. And you don't really need to do much to it. What you're adding into Word that you didn't have before. So you take that money and you try and do new things. You build an Xbox, you buy a games studio. And Sean's right. Microsoft are trying to make everything a rent service. The idea is that you bring in regular money all the time And that's really good news for an organization. They would rather have a small amount of money coming in regularly than a large amount of money when you don't know if it will actually come at all. So if you look around, lots of organizations are doing exactly that. But you take the money and you try and make new products. And as things go down, so Office has an issue. So if you have Word, great, use Word. But if you don't have Word, what is it you ever actually do with it? Write a letter? Write the odd report? Can't you just go to Google Docs and do it for free? Can't you do it on Apple Pages that you got for free with your device? So you can start to lose market share, and that puts you into the next box, the dog box. Where you're not growing the business, the market share is going down, so you're not losing money, but you're not getting anything from it either. It's basically just something that hangs around. And quite often you'll see businesses sell off sections of their business for this very reason. There's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but it doesn't fit into their portfolio and it doesn't give them an opportunity to make more money. So they might sell it to someone else who thinks that they can. So that's what the Boston box is, a simple way of categorizing your portfolio. So to do it, it's as simple as identifying the portfolio, assess it, and figure out which box it's supposed to go into. And if it's in the dog box, one that isn't bringing in much money, isn't going to get bigger, but is still eating up time and energy and effort, maybe dump it so you can concentrate on other things. You all know W.H. Smiths because you see them on the high street. Does anyone remember John Menzies? John Menzies, think W.H. Smiths, but with a big sign out front saying John Menzies. They did exactly the same sort of stuff. And about 20 years ago, maybe, they decided they were going to sell all their shops because they had two parts to their business. They had the distribution business. So think a newspaper, how do you get the newspaper to the shop? Okay, so they had that distribution business and they had the shop business. And they went, you know, the shops are fine. They're ticking over. They're not making much money. They're not losing much money. Why are we doing it? So they decided, nope, we're going to get out of that. We're going to concentrate all our effort on the distribution business. And they sold all their shops to W.H. Smiths, actually. The difficult one is the problem child. Getting bigger, but low market share. So there's potential there. So the potential could be it catches on and brings in lots of money and gets really good. Or the potential could be that it just falls by the wayside. It's hard to know. That's where managers earn their money. So hugely broad brush, hugely subjective. So subjective that some of your portfolio might not even belong in a single box. Bits of it might straddle boxes. So people often say use your common sense, and I hate the phrase common sense because I find common sense is not common and rarely includes much sense. So what I'm going to say is don't use your common sense, use your experience. Which is, of course, where you guys have a disadvantage. But that's something that you build up, and that goes back to some of the stuff that we were talking about right at the start. Okay, anyone have any questions? Yeah, better judgment is a decent phrase to use too. Anybody get any questions or comments about that? Logical thinking is one of them, but logical thinking might not always work. Logical thinking might say, I already have a phone in my pocket and a computer on my desk. Why do I need something that includes both the phone and a computer in my pocket? And there were lots of logical thinkers at BlackBerry who thought exactly those lines. And there were some illogical thinkers at Apple who disagreed. And I'd need to check, but I'm almost certain Apple sell more iPhones than BlackBerry sell mobile phones now. I mean, it's close, but you know, I think there's a wee difference there. Any other questions or comments? Yep. Logical thinkers had their way, smartwatches wouldn't exist. On the other hand, smartwatches aren't for everybody. They're a niche market. They are problem children. They may explode, but they may just die off. Now, BlackBerry's pretty much all but gone, Sean. I was being slightly disingenuous there. They still make phones, but any phones that they make are Android, and they don't sell very well. In fact, I think if they haven't stopped making phones, they are very close to it, and they turned off all the BlackBerry services. Remember, you used to get BlackBerry BlackBerry messaging, is that right? And that's all turned off. So they've turned off all those services, and a lot of old BlackBerry phones just don't work anymore. Okay, if there are no questions, then I will stop the recording.